From the outside, Claire Dawson's life looked calm and steady. It's almost like the weather in her quiet Oregon neighborhood soft, predictable, and peaceful. After years of carrying emotional weight from her past, she had finally found stability. With her new husband, Michael, it was the kind of man who spoke gently, planned everything carefully, and believed problems could be solved with patience. For Claire, who had lived through years of chaos before meeting him, his calmness felt like a safe harbor. So when Michael told her that his 22-year-old son, Ethan, would be staying with them until he finished his last year at college, Claire didn't think too deeply about it. She had met Ethan a few times before, polite, quiet, respectful. A young man who seemed older than his age, mostly because he carried himself with a seriousness that didn't match his warm smile. There was something distant in his eyes, something she couldn't quite understand. But as the weeks passed, Claire started noticing little things about Ethan, how he always helped with the groceries without being asked, how he avoided talking about himself, how he looked tired even on days he had no classes. She didn't pry, she simply respected his space. Still, she could feel him pulling away from something, or someone. She just didn't know what. Everything changed. One chilly Thursday evening, Claire had just finished cooking dinner when she heard the front door open much earlier than usual. Ethan normally returned late, often around 9 or 10. Sometimes later depending on his part-time job and the campus library. But that evening, he stepped inside before sunset, his shoulders slumped, his hair slightly damp from the drizzle outside. He looked up, startled, as if he didn't expect her to be standing near the hallway. "Hey," Claire said gently. "You're home early." Ethan forced a small smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, just didn't feel like staying out." His voice was tight, almost fragile. Claire noticed the redness around his eyes, the way he kept looking away, as though he didn't want her to see the truth hiding in them. She didn't ask what happened. Something inside her told her not to push. Instead, she simply gave him a soft nod. "Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes." She said quietly. "Thanks," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He moved past her, walking straight to his room. Claire watched him disappear down the hallway, a strange ache forming in her chest. She had seen pain before in friends, in strangers, in her old life, but seeing it in Ethan felt different. He wasn't her son, but he was part of her new family. And something about his sadness made her want to understand him more than she expected. During dinner, Ethan barely spoke. He pushed food around his plate, answered questions in short sentences, and avoided eye contact. Even Michael noticed. "Tough day?" Michael asked. "Yeah," Ethan murmured. But that was all he said after dinner. He went straight to his room again. Michael shrugged it off, assuming college stress or work pressure. But Claire could feel something heavier weighing on him, something personal, hours later. When the house grew quiet and Michael fell asleep early, as he usually did on weekdays, Claire found herself restless. She walked to the living room too, turned off the lights, and noticed Ethan's jacket still hanging near the door. It was damp from the rain. She reached for it, thinking she should remind him not to leave wet clothes in the hallway. But when she touched it, she felt something inside. The pocket. Not something dangerous, just a small folded paper. She didn't take it out. She didn't look. But the idea that Ethan had come home early upset. Carrying something in his pocket he didn't want anyone to see made her chest tighten again. She placed the jacket back gently. The rest of the evening felt strangely thick, like the air itself was holding a secret. Much later, Claire sat on the couch with a cup of tea, trying to relax. The living room was dim, and the rain outside tapped gently against the windows. She usually loved quiet nights like this. But tonight, her mind kept going back to Ethan's face, the sadness, the forced smile, the way his voice trembled. Then she heard it, a soft sound from the hallway. It wasn't loud. It wasn't alarming. It was just the quiet shuffle of someone walking slowly, as if trying not to disturb anyone. Ethan appeared in the doorway of the living room. He didn't step inside. He just stood there, leaning slightly against the wall. "Claire," he said softly. She looked up, surprised. "Hey, everything all right?" For a moment, he didn't speak. His eyes were glassy, not from tears, but from exhaustion, emotional, heavy exhaustion. "I just wanted to say thanks," he said, "for earlier, for not asking too many questions." Claire gave a warm, understanding smile. "You don't have to explain anything if you're not ready." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know." Then he hesitated long enough for Claire to sense that he wanted to say something more. But instead, he just offered a small, sad smile and walked back toward his room when he disappeared down the hallway. Claire let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She didn't know why the moment felt so intense, so delicate. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't anything inappropriate. It was just a fragile second between two people trying to understand each other without crossing any lines. She turned off the lights and went upstairs, but sleep refused to come. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying Ethan's expression over and over. Something had happened to him. Something deep, and whatever it was carrying it alone. Claire didn't know it yet, but that evening was only the beginning. What Ethan did next later that night would leave her awake until the morning, with a heart full of questions she never thought she'd asked. The first crack in the calmness of her new life had just appeared, and it was only going to grow. The next morning began quietly, but the quiet felt different, heavier, almost like the house was holding its breath. Claire woke up early, hoping the new day would feel normal again. She made coffee, opened the blinds, and tried to settle her mind. But the memory of Ethan's tired eyes from the night before stayed with her like a shadow. Michael left early for work with his usual cheerful goodbye, completely unaware of the tension underneath the surface. The moment the door closed, the house fell into a peaceful silence. Claire expected Ethan to stay in his room for hours, like he usually did on stressful days. Instead, she found him in the kitchen, already awake, standing near the counter with a cup in his hand. He looked different, still quiet, still distant, but calmer than he had been the night before. His hair was messy, his sweatshirt wrinkled, and his shoulders looked tired, but he wasn't hiding behind forced smiles this time. He was simply there, fully present in a way that surprised her. "Morning," Claire said softly. Ethan looked up. "Morning." For a few seconds, neither said anything. The only sound was the soft hum of the coffee maker. Then Ethan took a breath, set his cup down, and spoke in a voice so low Claire almost didn't hear it. "Claire, can I tell you something without it being strange?" Its expression was serious, almost nervous. Claire nodded gently, not wanting to rush him. "Of course," she said. "You can talk to me." Ethan looked at the floor as if searching for the right words. "I didn't come home early yesterday because I was tired. Something happened." Claire waited, her heart already tightening. He swallowed hard. "I broke up with someone." The confession was quiet but heavy, like he had finally let something slip that he had been holding on to tightly. Claire felt a wave of sympathy rush through her. "I'm really sorry," she said. "Breakups hurt more than people admit." Ethan nodded slowly, still not looking at her. "Yeah, this one. It wasn't just a relationship. She was someone I thought would stay. And when she left, it just hit harder than I expected." He finally looked up. His eyes weren't red anymore, but the sadness stayed beneath the surface. Claire felt something in her chest shift, a soft ache. Not romantic, but deeply human. She had been there before. She knew how it felt to lose someone you trusted. Heartbreak makes you feel alone even when you're not, she said. "But you're not alone." Ethan let out a shaky breath. "You're the only one who noticed something was wrong yesterday. Dad just assumed it was school stuff." "But you looked at me like you actually saw it." Claire didn't know what to say. Something about the way he said it made the room feel warmer, but also more delicate. She didn't want to cross any emotional line, yet she didn't want to shut him down either. "I care," she said softly. That's all. Ethan nodded again, this time more slowly, like he was letting her words settle inside him. But before anything more could be said, footsteps echoed down the hall. Michael entered the kitchen, cheerful and unaware of the emotional moment he had just walked into. "Morning, everyone," he said. Ethan immediately stepped back from the counter. The softness in his face disappeared, replaced by his usual polite expression. Claire watched him closely. He looked like someone who had been caught revealing too much and was trying to pull himself together. "I'm going to get ready for class," Ethan said quickly. "Thanks for the coffee." He grabbed his backpack and left the kitchen before Michael could say another word. The door to his room closed gently, but the emotional shift was unmistakable. Michael looked confused. "Everything okay with him?" Claire forced a small smile. "Just school stress, I think." She didn't know why she didn't tell Michael the truth. Maybe because the moment felt private. Maybe because she didn't want to share Ethan's vulnerability without his permission. Or maybe because she wasn't ready to explain the strange, protective feeling she had felt when Ethan opened up to her. The rest of the morning passed quietly. Claire tried to focus on her tasks, but her mind kept drifting back to Ethan's confession. She kept replaying the look in his eyes, the softness in his voice, the trust he had placed in her for just a few minutes before shutting it all away again. When Ethan finally came downstairs hours later, he didn't say much. His backpack was slung over one shoulder, and he looked distracted, heading out. Claire asked, "Yeah," he said. "Got class." He hesitated for a moment, like he wanted to say something more, but then he simply nodded and walked out the front door. Claire watched him leave through the window, feeling a mix of worry and something she couldn't quite name. The day passed. Slowly, Claire cleaned the house, answered emails, tried to read a book, but every quiet moment felt like it carried the weight of something unspoken. She wondered if Ethan was doing okay. She wondered if he regretted telling her anything at all. By evening, she started to feel restless. She walked into the living room to open the curtains. And that's when she saw something lying on the couch. Half hidden under a pillow, it was Ethan's notebook. He must have left it there. Before going to class, Claire reached for it carefully. She didn't intend to open it. She respected his privacy. But the notebook fell open on its own as she lifted it, flipping to a page with a single handwritten line. Just one sentence. And when she saw it, her heart stopped for a moment. "Why do I feel safer talking to Claire than anyone else?" The words weren't romantic. They weren't inappropriate. They weren't meant for her to see. They were simply honest, raw, lonely, vulnerable. Claire closed the notebook quickly, her hands slightly trembling. She wasn't supposed to read that. She knew it. But now that she had, something inside her felt shaken, not in a way that crossed boundaries, but in a way that made her feel deeply connected to Ethan's emotional world. For the rest of the evening, she couldn't stop thinking about that sentence. She moved through the house in a daze, her thoughts tangled between concern, confusion, and a strange sense of responsibility. When Ethan came home later that night, he avoided the living room entirely. He walked straight to his room without even looking her way. Claire understood immediately. He already knew she had seen the notebook, even if she never mentioned it. And that knowledge placed both of them into a silence filled with questions. Neither knew how to ask. Things were changing. Too fast, too unexpectedly, and Claire had no idea what would happen when Ethan finally decided to break that silence. The house felt unusually silent that night, a silence that followed Claire from room to room like a quiet reminder of something fragile hanging in the air. She tried to distract herself, folding laundry, wiping the counters, watching a light TV show, but her mind kept drifting back to the line in Ethan's notebook. "Why do I feel safer talking to Claire than anyone else?" It replayed over and over. Not because it was inappropriate or suggestive, but because it revealed an emotional weight she hadn't realized he placed on her. She felt honored but also worried. She didn't want Ethan to depend on her more than he should. She didn't want him to mistake comfort for something deeper. She wanted to be careful, thoughtful, respectful of everyone involved. By midnight, she gave up trying to sleep. She walked quietly down the stairs, hoping a glass of warm water would settle her thoughts. The living room was dim, the gentle glow from a small lamp casting soft shadows across the furniture. As she stepped inside, she paused, thinking about the notebook again. She wished she hadn't seen it, but she also knew that fate sometimes showed you things not by accident, but because you needed to understand something before you faced it. She set her glass on the table and sat down on the couch, rubbing her hands together to ease the tension. She wasn't expecting Ethan to come downstairs, but a few minutes later, she heard soft footsteps on the stairs, slow, hesitant. As though every step cost him a decision, Ethan appeared in the doorway. He didn't speak at first, stood still, his hand holding the rail lightly, his face half lit by the soft glow from the lamp. Claire noticed the uncertainty in his posture, the way he looked like a person debating whether to move forward or retreat. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Claire, can we talk?" The question didn't surprise her, but the vulnerability in his tone did. She nodded gently. "Of course. Come sit." Ethan walked toward the couch slowly, almost cautiously, and sat across from her. He clasped his hands together tightly, his shoulders tense. Claire waited patiently. She didn't want to rush him, I think. He started, then stopped. He took a breath and tried again. "I think you saw something you weren't supposed to see." Claire's heart skipped, but she stayed calm. "Your notebook was open," she said softly. "I didn't mean to read anything. It just happened." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. I'm not upset. I just didn't want to make things weird for you." There was a long pause. Then Ethan leaned back slightly, looking up at the ceiling as if searching for words he didn't want to say out loud. "I wrote that line because I don't know how to talk about what I'm feeling. Everything feels too heavy. And then yesterday, you looked at me like you actually saw the pieces I was hiding. Nobody does that." Claire felt a soft ache in her chest. She kept her voice calm and steady. "Ethan, I care about you. Everyone needs someone who listens. That's normal. That's human." "I know," he said quietly, "but it's hard. My breakup, it wasn't just losing a girlfriend. It was the closest thing I had to someone who understood me. And when she walked away, it felt like the world got smaller." He looked at Claire again, his eyes tired but sincere. "You stepped into that empty space without even knowing it." Claire's breath caught not because his words crossed a line, but because they were so honest. She could see now that Ethan wasn't looking for romance or anything inappropriate. He was looking for direction, comfort, steady presence he had lost. "I don't want to depend on you too much," he said quietly. "I don't want to mess up your peace. I don't want Dad to think anything weird. I just needed someone to talk to. Someone who doesn't judge." Claire softened. "You're not messing up anything. You're a young man going through something painful. It's okay to need support. It's okay to feel lost." He nodded, emotions flickering across his face. Relief, embarrassment, gratitude, confusion. "I wish I wasn't this emotional," he muttered, half laughing in a sad way. "There's nothing wrong with emotion," Claire replied. "What? Your feeling is real and it will pass. Right. But you don't have to go through it alone." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The living room felt warm, almost comforting, as if the truth finally had room to breathe. Then Ethan reached for the notebook he had brought with him. Claire hadn't noticed it at first. He placed it on the table between them. "I was going to rewrite that page," he admitted. "Pretend it didn't happen. But maybe I shouldn't hide things anymore." Claire looked at the notebook without touching it. "You don't need to rewrite how you feel," she said. "You just need to understand it." Ethan sighed deeply, sinking into the couch. "I don't want you to think I'm confused or Ethan," Claire interrupted gently. "You're not confused. You're hurting." And sometimes we look for the closest light when everything feels dark. That doesn't mean the light belongs to us. It just means we need warmth for a moment." Ethan blinked, absorbing her words. Then he nodded slowly. "That? Make sense?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his hands loose now instead of clenched. "I don't want to create any distance between us," he said softly. "But I don't want things to feel strange either." Claire smiled kindly. "Nothing feels strange. We just have to be honest and respectful with each other. That's all." Ethan let go of a breath he had been holding for days. She could see the tension leaving his shoulders. Little by little, the conversation wasn't romantic. It wasn't dangerous. It wasn't crossing boundaries. It was simply emotional, truth-real, raw, and human. For the first time since his breakup, Ethan looked lighter, as if speaking the truth had loosened the burden he carried. They sat in silence for a few more moments, the kind of silence that feels soft, not heavy. The fire in the small fireplace crackled gently, filling the room with warmth. Finally, Ethan stood. "Thank you," he whispered. "Really?" Claire nodded. "Any time." He walked toward the hallway, paused, then looked back. "You helped me more tonight than you know." And then he disappeared into the hallway, leaving Claire alone with her thoughts and a heart shaking not from fear or confusion, but from the weight of responsibility and compassion. She knew things were changing, but she also knew she had to guide them gently, carefully, and with the maturity both of them needed. The next few days passed quietly, but the quiet didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt thoughtful, careful, like both Claire and Ethan were trying to find the right rhythm after their emotional conversation. They didn't avoid each other, didn't cling to each other. They simply moved with a new understanding, gentle, respectful, steady. Still, something lingered in the air. A mix of unspoken gratitude and unfinished truth. On Saturday afternoon, Michael suggested they spend the day at the local farmer's market. It was something they did often, picking up fresh bread, vegetables, and sometimes flowers. Claire agreed, though a part of her felt distracted. Ethan usually came along, but this time he said he needed to study. Michael didn't think twice about it, but Claire caught a quiet look in Ethan's eyes. Something that said he had more on his mind than textbooks. While she walked through the crowded market with Michael, she kept wondering, was he all right? Did he feel awkward? Was he carrying something else inside him he hadn't shared yet? Her worry stayed with her the whole time they were out. When they returned home in the evening, the house was warm, the lights soft. Claire expected Ethan to be in his room, but he wasn't. He was sitting in the living room, waiting. His posture was calm, but his hands were fidgeting slightly, something he only did when he was nervous. Michael went upstairs to shower, leaving Claire alone with Ethan. "Hey," she said, placing the grocery bags on the table. "Studying all day?" "Not really," he said honestly. "I was thinking." She sat down across from him, sensing his hesitation. "Thinking about what?" He took a breath, looked at his hands, then slowly lifted his gaze to meet hers. "About us," he said quietly. Her heart tightened, not in fear, but in a soft readiness to guide whatever conversation was coming. She kept her voice gentle. "Tell me." Ethan pressed his lips together, gathering courage. "I've been trying to figure out why I felt so attached to the idea of you listening to me. Why writing that line in my notebook felt so natural. Why talking to you felt safe." Claire nodded, staying calm. "At first," he continued, "I thought I was just lonely. That losing my girlfriend made me lean on anyone who cared. But that wasn't it." His voice grew steadier. "Looking for stability, for peace. For a place where I didn't have to pretend." He paused, searching her expression for judgment. He saw none. "You're that place," he whispered. "Not because you're anything more than you are, but because you remind me of what a calm life looks like, what a caring home feels like." Claire felt a warmth spread through her chest, a relieved understanding settling in. This wasn't a confession of romantic desire. It wasn't an overstepping of boundaries. It was a young man finally realizing the emotional truth behind his confusion. People often mistake comfort for connection. Ethan was learning the difference. She leaned forward slightly. Ethan, thank you for telling me. It means a lot that you trust me with this. He exhaled slowly, as if releasing a burden. I guess I needed to hear myself say it out loud. And now that you have, Claire said gently, how do you feel? Claire, he said, much clearer. He ran a hand through his hair, almost embarrassed. I want to make something very clear, too. I don't want you to think I'm crossing lines or imagining something complicated. I respect you. Respect Dad. I respect our home. I know you do, Claire replied. He looked at her with a steady, honest gaze. I was never attracted to you or anything like that. I was just drawn to the peace you carry. I think I needed to feel that for a little while. Claire nodded, feeling both relief and tenderness. Ethan, there's nothing wrong with seeking comfort in people who care. Life is emotional. Humans need connection. But your right tit has to stay healthy, clear, and respectful. That's what I want, he said. Respect, clarity, and to feel like I can still talk to you, just without the confusion. Claire smiled softly. You can, anytime. The tension that had built over the days slowly dissolved, like mist clearing in the morning light. The truth had settled everything firmly, safely, gently. But the moment wasn't finished. Ethan took another breath, his voice growing steadier. There's one more thing I want to say. I don't think I've ever really had a stable mother figure in my life. Not since I was a kid. You're the first person who made me feel grounded. I think that's why I attached my emotions to you. The confession hit Claire in a way she didn't expect. Not romantically, not even close. But deeply, humanly, painfully. She understood now. He wasn't seeking her heart. He was seeking a place to rest his own. Ethan, she said, tears warming her eyes. I can be supportive. I can care. I can listen. But I want you to grow strong on your own, too. I want you to learn to heal, not just lean. He nodded. I'm trying. That's why I wanted to talk. I want to move forward in a healthy way. And you will, she said softly. You're wiser than you think. For the first time in days, Ethan's smile was real, not forced. Not sad, not uncertain. Real. Just then, Michael came down the stairs. Cheerful and unaware of the quiet emotional breakthrough that had just unfolded. Ethan stood up, giving Claire a gentle, respectful nod, one that said thank you. One that said, I'm okay now. Hey, Dad, he said casually. Feel like ordering pizza tonight. Michael laughed. Music to my ears. Claire stood up too, letting the moment settle in her heart. It wasn't dramatic or romantic. It wasn't a forbidden connection. It was a human one, messy, emotional, but pure. Later that night, after they all shared dinner and laughter filled the living room again, Claire stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. The cool evening breeze brushed her skin and she closed her eyes. She thought about everything that had happened, the sadness, the confusion, the trust, the honesty. And she finally felt peace. Ethan had found clarity. She had found understanding. And their home had found balance again. The chapter of emotional uncertainty had closed gently, respectfully, in a way that brought everyone closer without crossing a single line. Life moved forward, steady and calm, and the truth, once spoken, had changed everything.